Hi, welcome to All the Remote Things again with Tony. And today I've got a fantastic guest all the way from the island of the Long Cloud, or across the ditch, as we say over this side of the world, Sandy Mamoli. How are you today?
I'm really good. Thank you, Tony. And thank you so much for having me here.
Oh, it's fantastic to have you. I mean, we've crossed paths many times over the years in the Agile circles, and I've had you on a podcast that I do as well. So fantastic to have you. But for those that don't really know you, would you like to introduce yourself?
Of course, I do. Um, my name is Sandy Mamoli, and I think I'm going to start like ages and ages ago because I started my professional life as a professional athlete. I played handball. I went to the 1992 Olympics, and this will become relevant later in our conversation. But at some point, I then had to grow up like everyone else has, and I decided software development was the thing. Went to uni and became a software developer, and I have been working Agile since 2003. And then after a while, moved to New Zealand. I was working in Amsterdam, Copenhagen, and Stockholm. I moved to New Zealand and figured out that there was no way I was going to go back into the old ways of working. That was around 2006, and started a company called Nomad 8. That's now 15 years old, 14 people. And what we do is basically sprinkle agile magic on teams and companies and help people have more fun at work.
I love the way you call it. It's agile magic. I like that. Yeah. So
Fairy dust.
fairy dust. Well, we need a bit of that because every time somebody creates a Gantt chart, it kills an agile fairy, right? So we need to regret.
Yes.
All right. So talking about that, you've been doing some great work, and one of the reasons I was excited to get you on the cast because we've talked many times about the self-selection stuff that you've done and other conversations that I've had. But I wanted to hone back further on some other stuff that you've been doing, which is really around individual performance as opposed to team performance. Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. That's why I said that my sporting background will become relevant in a moment, because that's what led me on to that kind of thinking. And the thing is, I stopped professional handball, which is a team sport. And recently, a few years ago, I started doing CrossFit. And first of all, trust a CrossFitter to always mention CrossFit.
Got the plug in.
Yes. Secondly, of course, it's a cult. So's Agile, so perfect. But I started CrossFit, and that was my first individual sport. And I realized the difference this made, how the mindset was different, how the way you work on your strengths and weaknesses is different, how you assess performance in the first place is very, very different. And I took that realization and started observing software teams. And what I realized was that I think that in our organizations, everything we deliver as teams. But we are super obsessed with individual performance. We have all those KPIs, they're individuals. We have performance management plans, and they're individual. And that clashes with team performance, and it focuses on the wrong things. And I think that the problem is those are not bad things, but those are things that we take from kind of individual performance or individual sports, and we apply them to a context that's essentially a team sports context. And I think that's where the problem lies.
It's an interesting take on that because organisations tend to be geared, even though we've been doing this some time yourself and I, and you traverse many organisations as consultant and etc. And most organisations they proclaim to be team oriented, but when you come down to it, they're actually geared to the individual performance, which is juxtaposition to trying to get that creativity in teams. And we spend a lot of time trying to do that, but you find we're banging against the internal mechanisms. Your thoughts?
Yes, I totally agree. And I think there's a couple of things in that. Like, one is that I think it is driven by two things. One is there's a lack of trust that, whoa, what do we do if someone is lazy and doesn't pull their weight? We need to find out and we need to do something about it. I think that's one thing. And the other thing I think is a misunderstanding, a fundamental misunderstanding on how what a high performance team looks like. And that is that the team will perform best if the people within the team are the A players, are individually doing their own best performance, that surely this will give you the best team. But I don't think that's the case, because if you got 6 or 7 A players, if you got the best players, they might not have complementary skills. They might have the same skills. They might not be able to create that magic that comes out of relationships, or out of, I can just cover this one part that happens to be your weakness, Tony. So I think that's a fundamental misconception right there. And that drives that we focus so much on individual performance rather than just looking at the team.
And it's not just focusing on the individual performance per se, as in terms of, it's the remuneration that's fashioned around that, both from executive leader to leader to persons who are doing the work. Right? I say persons, not resources.
Thank you.
Look at resources, they're things. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox. And I think in the environment now we have a hybrid or remote work, that's even exacerbated it even more. I'm not sure what you're seeing, but I've seen that, where it's become a case of really focusing in on this individual performance.
Yes, I see that too. And I think from a management perspective, it's maybe so much easier, or it's not easier to measure, but it's easier to believe that you can measure it. And it's easier to believe that you're measuring something that's actually relevant. And if I compare that to a sports team, for example, I don't need to cover everything. I can have weaknesses in it if I'm part of a team, because I know you've got me, and vice versa. Whereas if I'm just an individual and we remunerate, that's a really hard word.
It is, isn't it?
Just on an individual basis, I will look at you and go, cool, are you a complete working person? Do you have any weaknesses? And I will make a development plan with you to just kill any weaknesses and go, oh, you're really bad at this thing, you need to work on it. Whereas if we have a team approach, we go, cool, you're bad at this thing, so maybe we add someone else to the team, or we have someone else in the team who can cover that. Or maybe you are better off in a different team, because you are solving a puzzle to create something that's a whole unit versus just you and yourself. And I think that changes everything.
And I think whilst we recognise that, or sometimes we get leaders to recognise that, there seems to be an organisational reluctance to take that between the team. And that's sort of a good segue to some of the work you've been doing about how you create great teams. So there's two factors to the question: is how do we get them to start thinking about taking that bit between the team? Because if they don't, we're going to keep having the same problem. And then how do you form those great teams that you've seen? How do you take that essence of understanding that? Because it's not a cookie cutter approach, right? But there are essences of things that we do when we create great teams that you can take. If you look at the great coaches of the world, they take the essence of those thoughts, but they don't do it in the same way every time.
Yeah, that template or cookie cutter approach doesn't exist, or it does, but it fails. It doesn't work.
But I'm a consultant. I've got to. No, anyway, continue.
Yeah, pay me gazillions of dollars, please. Yeah, I think part of it is leadership and understanding. And there, I want to say that if we have something that we know doesn't work, then we stop doing it. Then we should not keep doing it, even though we don't know what else to put in place, because what we're doing is making things worse. Just stop. And then to your second question is, so for teams, how can we create high performance teams? How can they create or get better and better performing? And one of the things that I, again, took from sports and that I'm fascinated by is comparing teams. And I also know that's like this big no in the agile coaching sense. You don't compare teams because people might feel bad, they might be pushed and so on. But I do believe, like, if you take, again, the sports comparison, I can't know whether, like, a handball team, you score 20 goals. Is that good or bad? It depends on what your opponent scores. It might be amazing, it might be not good. And so that's just comparison. The lucky thing is that work, we don't need to have winners and losers. It's not a zero-sum game. So when I say compare, I honestly mean compare and not compete or smash them. So I believe that the thing is to just have teams go out and see other teams, like within their own organization, within other organizations, and then just compare and go, hey, they're doing this thing, and that's working really, really great for them. Can we use that too? See other teams go, wow, we thought we were nailing it, but those guys are amazing. So it just gives inspiration as to what's possible. So I personally like comparison. And then you have to have grown-ups who can deal with going, hey, we're not as good as those guys, so we want to learn.
I like that. I like that because there is a terrible thing within our community of this is a personal soapbox of mine, but the compare thing, I understand where you're coming from, because the minute you say compare, I can imagine the darts being thrown right now, right? But you're not talking about maturity assessments, right? You're not talking about comparing velocity, right? All velocities are not equal. That's my commandment, right? Right. What you're talking about is looking at and getting them to compare the way they work.
Yep.
It's the things that are working for a team that's obviously working in that high performance sphere. They're knocking it out of the park. What can we take for them? So sorry, still something you've done it, but it really lines up with that, because any time I hear the word, and hate's a strong word, but I really use a strong word for that, because the minute I hear maturity assessment, who am I to say you're more mature than you are and that you should be as mature in them in the way? That's a terrible.
Yeah. And it also implies that there's one way of doing things, like how mature are you? And there are many different ways, and contexts are different. And maybe there's this amazing high performance team doing a thing that you just can't do because your context is different, or it wouldn't work for you. And I think that's totally fine. But what I do want to rip people out of is the closing their eyes to what's around them because they are afraid of comparing themselves or finding out that they're not as good as they think. I think it can be so enriching to go out and see what others are doing and learning from them. And even if you find out, like, I thought we were pretty good, but actually we're not. That's just knowledge. That's just knowledge about where you're at, and now you can do something about it. So there is so much, and that's a mindset that comes from sports. And I wish, and I'm trying to help people to apply more of a sports mindset to their work and to working in agile teams.
I love it. And so if I'm talking about creating those high performance teams, because you're obviously working in this a lot, I know that, and I'm seeing some of the things. So if I was to ask you to give them your 3 top tips, right? And I'm putting you on the spot. Well, what are the 3 things you would say look at these things? I know it's not a cookie cutter, but these are the 3 things you would say, think about these things.
The very first thing is do you have something that ties the team together? Do you have something that's compelling enough for that group of potentially diverse people to want to overcome their diversity, overcome that and work together in the first place? Can you make them want to work together? The second is see the unit as the team, the unit of production, the unit of creating outcomes is the team, never the individual. And the third one is that doesn't mean people are not important, but see people as how they fit into the team, help them develop their strengths, and just get maybe average at their weaknesses. Their basic collaboration skills, but apart from that, be average at many things and world class at a few. I think that's 3 things.
Well, that was 3. You can add more if you wish, but that's brilliant. I think that's a good segue into something that we were just talking about, that you were talking about at Agile Australia, because it runs through the line of what we're talking about, and it's really that leading with empathy, right? So you were talking to me about, there's a lot of things about leadership and performance, etc., but what about leading with empathy? Talk to me about your thoughts on that.
I think At the moment, what I see is that it's getting more divided. There are lots of leaders who are getting better and better at having empathy with their employees, having empathy with people and teams. And at the same time, also leaders who are making more noises about control, forcing people to come back to the office, wanting to know exactly what people are doing. And it's actually a bit of a, I had an interesting experience because I went to Agile Australia, and the topic was leadership with empathy.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought there's so much happening there. We have an entire conference talking about it. Many of my clients have wellness programs. They support mental health. They give people days off if they need them. And I think those are absolutely great things. And then I thought, well, what about actually the other way around? Is anyone actually thinking about the leaders and how they are coping and how they feel? So what I did is I went out and I talked to leaders. And we're talking on CEO, GM level, the New Zealand Retirement Commission, and so on. And I did interviews with them, started during lockdowns, did them afterwards, and some as recently as like 3 weeks ago. And there's a number of things that just came out of this. And that one is that when they ask people to come back to the office, when they sometimes come across as being controlling, they're not looking for control. They're looking for connection. Because it is so hard as a leader, if you are high up, to retain connection with someone who's 4 levels down from you. Like, talk to CEO, he said, we don't know what's going on in the organization because we don't run into people in the kitchen. We don't see their faces. We don't know how they feel. If I want to talk to them, I need to have a meeting. I'm the CEO. If I make a meeting with someone 4 levels down from me, that person's going to have a heart attack. Why does the CEO want to talk to me? What did I do?
That's true.
So I realized how really, really hard it is for them to keep that connection. And I think the everyone back to the office is a knee-jerk reaction because they haven't really figured out how to retain that connection. Neither have I, or have we, I think. But I think this is we need to make this a shared problem rather than going, you need to trust us, and leaders going, you need to go back to the office. We want the same thing, but we need to figure out what are the acceptable good behaviors in a workplace now. How do we make this work? And I think that's both kind of sides listening to each other.
It's an interesting thing, isn't it? Because with with that move into remote, and now we're remote and hybrid. We remote. AF and myself have been saying for some time that actually leaders are the ones who took the biggest hit. Like, I know our people took a bit of a hit, and I'm not slighting that, but then again, people adjusted to that working and then adjusted to the new mechanisms and such that, there's a push to stay that way is very big, and it's not going away, right? But for leaders, you take away, so, when you look at the general leadership controls, you take away that sense of connection or control, and that only leaves command in the armory. So they revert to the command. You must, you would, you should, you have to, you need to be where I can get it. And you can understand that because without that context and designing it purposefully around that, they end up in a bind where they have to be in every single meeting to even try and get that connection. They can't just walk down and say, hey, drop it to the floor. So it's an interesting thing, and I love that you're talking about it with empathy. That really excites me.
Yeah, and what excites me is that I think the empathy needs to go both ways.
Yeah.
And it was a bit of an eye-opener for me because I was very much on the why don't they just trust people? Like, what's your problem? You've got a control issue, really. To realize this is not it. What might look like a control issue is actually almost a cry for help. Like, I have no other, as you say, I have no other tools left than to just do command.
I think there's sort of, as I say to you off air, there's, the naming of it is that I use is organizational trauma. Right, my compatriot Dave and I were chatting about that the other day, and it's organizational trauma, not just at the leader, but at the people level, and it's created by some of this, but it's also fed by organizations who've jumped onto this and gone, well, you've got a problem. we'll give you a mechanism to deal with it. You can monitor what your people are doing by software, or we can tell how long they've been at a desktop. You know, and we were talking about a terrible thing where they've created a thing called a jiggler, right? You can put your mouse in this thing and it moves it for you so that it confounds it. That's a terrible thing that we're seeing.
Yes. This is, yeah, absolutely horrible. It's like if you're in an organization like that, I mean, you just really walk out. But it brings us back, I think, about the individual versus the team.
Yeah.
Because tying this back, this is people trying to measure the performance of individuals. Are you working enough? And instead of going, who cares if you are working enough? Maybe the best thing for the team is that actually you don't do anything right now.
Yeah, that's right. Perhaps that's what you need in that moment. And again, add over that remote lens. Also, it's also about, you know, your work is in your home and your home is in your work. So the mechanisms are different now, right? You have children running around, or we were talking about our dogs on cue, yours barked. But the reality is you have some of those things happening, and it might, you still get the work done, but you don't do it exactly at that like you used to. And that's typical. I call it, you know, the evolution of, or the end of the 9 to 5.
Yes, it absolutely is. And I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It makes me think though of when you say about the children walking through the camera and the dogs barking in the background. Something leaders like several of them see is like people don't see us as humans. And I think they have a really good point there. And there's something we have lost because under no circumstances do I want to have lockdowns back. But during that time, it was this shared crisis where we saw our leaders as people because they were working from the backgrounds from the bedrooms with shitty backgrounds and dogs barking at them. And we saw them as people. And that's, the leaders said that's how they felt. And that has stopped. It has stopped now a lot more with people sitting back, wanting to be told what to do because they're tired.
Yes.
And that causes a problem because leaders need to bring all the energy. Leaders feel that they can never show how they feel, but they need to just keep people's spirits up. And we don't really, lots of people don't, their impression is that they're not being seen as human beings anymore.
Yeah, it's a bit of a byflow, isn't it? Because it's learned helplessness created by sometimes that application of command and control to get the connection back.
Yes.
But then again, it has a bounce back in it where people then become tired, and then they get to the point where they're just waiting for someone to tell them what to do, right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And I think we need to break that.
Yeah,
we need to break that.
And I think it's beholding upon, you know, particularly in our particular work, we do have windows into that, and we have the ability to help them try and do that. So I think that's something that we should be doing. It beggars the point that, you know, how do you boost that autonomy and engagement within teams to enable that? But it's a bit of a double-edged sword, so it's not an easy thing to do.
It's not, and I think it's also not completely binary. Kind of like, hey, trust those people. It's like, trust them a bit, then they will do something good. Then you trust them a bit more. And you also won't go from zero connection to 100% connection. So it's, I think it's just small moves in the right direction under the agreement that this is a shared problem that nobody has really figured out just yet. And we are redefining the world of work, which is really exciting and cool, but we need to do it together. And the one fear I have is that we end up doing the worst of both worlds.
The worst of both worlds.
Yeah.
It's just going back to what we were doing in the beginning, which wasn't working, right? So I absolutely agree with you. I'm going to take a little bit of a right hand turn because we could lose ourselves down that rabbit hole for hours, obviously. But it plays into this. Is that it's the teaching thing that you've been doing as well. So I saw this clip on it, but it was mob teaching. Now, you know, if anybody's watching this who's been around the Agile bastions, they would have heard of Woody's, you know, mob programming, etc., and quite aware of this. But you've taken a different sort of slant on and called mob teaching. Talk to us a bit about that, because it was really exciting.
Yeah. So first of all, I have tried mob programming like years and years and years ago, and I loved it. And but I haven't had the opportunity to do it for quite a few years. But it has been in my background, back of my head for like a really long time as a positive, amazing experience. So just want to say thank you to Woody for inventing this awesome thing. But I was quite recently, I had a team and a new team member joining. And what I've done in the past was like, hey, such and such is joining. You're the Agile coach. Can you take them aside? Can you explain to them what Agile is and how it works and how the team work? And it's like, yep, I'll take you out for a coffee. I'll explain it to you. And then I thought, this is just really boring because it's a conversation. It's mainly me talking at that poor person. I'm boring myself. And that's when I remembered that, that mob programming. Why can't we do mob teaching? And basically take this to the team. Why don't you explain that person how you work, and you explain to them how Agile works? And I developed, figured out a way to facilitate that, building product boxes for each meeting, where people explain what the meeting is, what they're doing, why they're doing it, when it happens for that team, and the team then explaining to the new person how it works. And I found it worked really, really well because it was like the first team bonding event for the rest of the team and this one person, not just me and the new person. The new person learned a lot. They always said yes, they now understand how it works. And also as a coach, it has given me some insights where there might be some other gaps that I need to talk to the team about or fix. And that's basically it in a nutshell.
That's it in a nutshell, but it's so much more when you see it actually enacting. What are the things you got to watch out for in it though? Because I can see there's a lot of positives, but I think what I could glean from it is if you're not doing it in the right way, it could become a little negative as well. So thoughts on that?
I'm not sure negative, but or maybe I'm just blind to any potential risks. What I thought of could happen is what if I have a team that has complete misunderstandings about something, and then teaching the new person.
Negative is probably not the right word, but yeah,
get where I'm
coming from you.
Yeah, going. You think a sprint planning meeting is what? And explaining that to a new person, and how do you step in?
Yeah.
Or do you step in when they're like off track and dragging the new person down? And I did plan for this. Like, it didn't happen, but I did plan for it because it's my fear. And I thought if that happens, I would let it go. Like, cool, this is how the team currently do this horrible meeting that I think doesn't work, but let them do it. The new person joins, does it in the same way, and then start working on it. By the way, should we change this? Because I don't want to expose the entire team going, you're doing what? And it's still fixable, I think, because it's not the one and only time that as a coach you interact.
No, that's what we do, right? So I think, my thought on it, I guess negative was a bad word, but you got my intent. For me, it's that coaching from the back of the room moment, isn't it, really? You've got to sort of let them traverse. But I was wondering if you thought about or had that happen to you, where they'd taken a bad tangent, because sometimes that happens, and sometimes you have people with opinions that they want to impress on everybody. So
yes, very true. And I think if they are in agreement and they're slightly off, I would fix it later. And sometimes you get to step in and not just do what this one person said. And I think a good way of doing this is, as a coach, we all know how this works, like asking those innocent, open-ended questions, which in a way are manipulating a little bit to make people realize they are off track here.
Yeah, that's good. Sandy, this has been fantastic, and unfortunately at times very, very close to the end. How can people get in touch with you? How can they interact with some of these wonderful things that we're hearing about?
I am basically everywhere over the internet. But first of all, I think lots of the things that I do, I write about and publish on our blog, which is nomad8.com. There, find the articles there. There's quite a lot. I'm also, feel free to connect to me on LinkedIn. I will connect to all the Agile people in the world. And feel free to drop me an email at sandy@nomad8.com.
And of course, there's a book or two around with Sandy's name on it as well. So don't hesitate to read those, because they're not a bad read. And I say Sandy wasn't promoting, but I will, because they're really, really good reads. So it's been fantastic to have you on. If you're listening to this, don't forget, like and subscribe so you can keep up with all the new episodes. If you want to join our community, remoteaf.co, click the community button and join that community. There's a circle community behind that with a bunch of people, who are talking about all of these things that we've talked about today. And we'd love to have you join us. All the remote things. It's been fantastic to have you on today, Sandy.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been great fun.